You're listening to another episode of Open Source CXO, the podcast designed to share insights on how to excel in your business using technology, regardless of the industry. Host Robert Kehoe is a self-taught software developer who has grown to the role of CEO. Renowned for his collaborations with organizations such as Stanford University, Nelnet, and Louis Vuitton, he continually seeks new challenges to conquer in the world of tech. Accompanying him is Don Blackburn, a veteran COO with over 25 years of experience in cultivating diverse relationships and driving innovation in various technical projects. Each week, they'll be sitting down with some of the nation's foremost technology leaders to develop an open source playbook, drawing from their firsthand experiences in the field. Let's talk some tech.
So today we're talking to Shahzad Zafar, who is former CTO at RX Savings here in Kansas City and currently CTO at Trualta.
Yep.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Why don't we start tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us a little about Trualta. I don't know how many people are familiar with that organization because they're not local, correct?
No, they're not local. So Trualta is a caregiver education and support platform. So what we engage with is at-home caregivers, even paid caregivers, to see how we can help provide education. To be honest, I had always heard of this as a problem with having relatives and acquaintances I know and friends who had been caregivers and how hard it was for them. And until I really started digging in with Trualta, I didn't realize how big of an issue it is, and it's becoming increasingly hard. So being isolated as a caregiver because you're so busy with the care recipient, the patient, that sometimes you cut off from the world. And so we come in and provide, like, how do you look after somebody, for example, with dementia? How do you look after that? Give you tips and tricks and trainings, as well as providing some social forums and ways for you to connect with other caregivers and become more connected in your community.
What do you feel like your next steps are in growing that team? Any key elements? Do you see any key elements or people that you look for or anything like that when you go to grow a team like that?
Yeah, definitely there are some things I look for when growing teams. One is you want to look for people who are willing to learn and are not, especially in a startup, in a small team, are willing to do anything, right? Because I can have a job description for you and I can give you our standard job description for a software engineer for this team. Yeah. But that doesn't mean 3 months from now that changes.
So flexibility for
sure. Flexibility is a key. We want people who are comfortable in that a little bit of an unknown, comfortable in quickly changing direction, quickly learning new things, and are self-driven and self-motivated. What I used to do this at RX too, and even over here I've talked to is like, excuse me, that if you're coming to a startup like this, if you're expecting your hand to be held, it will be held for about a month.
Yeah.
And then you gotta get on your own.
You gotta fly on your own.
Sure. There's no, like Cerner, for example, over time had built an excellent training model. Like Cerner's Dev Academy was awesome. You would go in there for 3 months and then you would come out with a lot of training. It was like, there's no Dev Academy. Yeah, we're gonna kind of tell you where the resources are, and then you gotta go
throw you in the deep end.
Absolutely. Yeah, that makes sense.
We'll throw you on projects and you'll figure out. Ask good questions. Reach out to your team. Everybody is willing to help, and they will help you, but you gotta know to ask for help.
Yeah.
Like, you can't be shy about that.
Sure.
And not be afraid when things don't go so well and be like, no, I'm going to work with the team. Everybody's here to help.
How do you manage that? I know there's a lot of devs, and I have my fair share of working with a few. So sometimes they'll be in their own way. They won't reach out for help. So how do you get somebody, how do you make them feel comfortable enough without feeling, I guess, the whole imposter syndrome at that point? So how do you do that with especially a new team?
Yeah, I mean, this is where as a leader you got to set the tone, in the sense of, like, do you create an environment where you're constantly learning, create an environment for learning. So some things that I've done in the past, and even now I'm trying to do it at Trualta, is like having team-wide what I call learning breaks. It's like, hey, every other week or every few weeks we'll meet and we'll discuss a topic. Doesn't matter what it is. And anybody can come up and talk. You don't have to prep. Just, get on our call, get in our meeting, and share knowledge to kind of create that environment that we're always learning. And for me, the onus is that in those meetings, I'm not the one just like checked out, but no, I'm actively participating and asking questions, and learning myself, which is honestly half the time I am learning myself on the different topics people are talking about. So it's that to create that environment of it's okay to ask questions and nobody's going to judge you if you don't know the answer. It's like, no, that's actually encouraged. That's what I'm looking for. And then on the flip side, for our experienced folks is always looking for like when looking at, when people ask me, what does a senior engineer mean to you? And I'm like, well, the one is obviously expertise. That's the easy one. That, hey, you are a master, you have the mastery of your skill set. Sure. But the other aspect I look for is how much are you helping others around you?
Yeah.
And if you are an all-star on a team, but the rest of the team is struggling, well, you're failing.
Yeah.
It's like you gotta be in a position where you're helping others and teaching others. So naturally creates that encouragement for the more experienced folks to help others who need help, and that we're gonna look at the whole team and make sure the whole team is working well, not just one person. And others are not doing so well.
I'd imagine there's a balance there too, though. If somebody requires just nonstop help after help, I guess that would sort of just factor into maybe a bad hiring decision at that point. Then. Okay.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is not to say that everything is all green and everything is all amazing.
Sure. I would be curious if, when you go out looking for members of your team now that you're building this team, do you favor people coming from smaller environments, other startups, or do you go after the Cerner folks? Then,
it's a mix. Definitely, if somebody has worked in a smaller environment, it helps. But at RX, some of our I hired some really good people at Cerner from Cerner too. Now this is where sometimes having knowing someone who knows someone is really good, so that, hey, if I'm looking to hire somebody, but if you know them, I might give you a call and be like, hey, you work with this person, like, tell me about them. What is their work ethic? How do they work? How do they behave? How do they work within a team?
Right.
Those things really help. And at Cerner, we were able to leverage that because we had enough people from Cerner who had enough contacts that could talk to each other, and we could get some of that feedback. So that really helped, but not necessarily that there's a bias for people who had worked in a small place. But if somebody has worked in a small place, it's easier to explain the changes they'll go through.
They've already been through that.
They're already sitting through the fire.
Sure.
How would you okay, so I know that there's a lot of people who value, the stability. So how do you attract people to a startup? I know RX at the time was, a decent sized startup.
Yeah.
So, but even smaller than that, how do you attract people to take that leap, and join something that maybe otherwise not as
fail.
Stable? Yeah.
Right.
No, absolutely. Absolutely could fail. I think the way I talk about it is like, when you're going to join our team, you're going to join an empowered team. Like, no matter your role, no matter your level, you're empowered to go make a decision. I'll help you make a decision. If you need help, always call me up. Let's talk about it. But you will learn things faster in a small place than you will learn in a large place. So what I'd say is, like, if I'd stayed at Cerner, I would have learned the things that I've learned today, but it would have taken me like 10 years, 15 years to get to that point. Whereas at RX, it was like within 2 years, it was like drink from a fire hose, learn, and you got to learn fast. Right. Similar for engineers. I think the attraction is that, one, you'll be empowered to go make those decisions. If you think something is wrong, here's your chance to go do it better. And if you want to learn something new, it's a perfect place to learn something new. So really feeding into that. And that also helps to make sure that if somebody does not have that learning mindset, they will hopefully just self-select themselves out of the process. And I always encourage people, it's like, I will never take it personally. Like, this is totally cool. Like, I'll tell you what the expectations are. And if you don't think you fit, please, like, no harm, no foul. Like, it's good we decide now. And I try to be very open in our interviews, to be very open in, like, this is the environment. This is the pace of the environment. This is the learning mindset. This is how you're going to have to operate. And this is a responsibility you'll have to take on. If you're not comfortable, totally fine. But if you are, which I feel like most engineers who are interviewing for a small company want that.
Yeah.
So which makes it okay.
Well, they want to take that ownership, for sure. I think is what is attractive to a lot of people.
Yeah. But then on the other side, there's nowhere to hide either.
Yeah.
Your work is magnified because you're not 8 layers down from, top leadership like you would be in a huge organization.
Yeah.
So, that's not go to work and just keep your head down and do your job and draw your paycheck. It's not that. It's
even at RX,
very
I knew
visible.
Every engineer's name, I knew who they were. So it was not like they were hidden. even though they didn't report to me directly, but I was aware of who they were, what they were doing. So to your point, it's very visible, but that visibility is the high risk, high reward, right? You get the visibility.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
If you relish in that, you'll grow so much faster in your career.
So how do you mentioned that when you were hired on at RX, the joke was that, what's your role again? So how do you manage that? So let's say you have a team that you've built, and then you go out and you hire somebody who might be, a manager over certain people, to people who have been there for an extended period of time. How do you sort of manage those feelings and how people feel about those situations? I can imagine that's kind of tricky.
Yeah, it is tricky. And when I've hired kind of the more experienced engineers, and for myself even coming in to both at RX and even at Trualta, I came in, there was a team already there, and I was hired in on directly as a CTO. It's, for me, I would always say my goal number one is how quickly can I build trust within the team, is to meet with everybody, understand what they do, and then also kind of help them understand what do I bring to the table, right? If I was hired, hopefully the person hiring me had some different, something that they were lacking that I can help fill that gap. And then it's for me to demonstrate that I can fill that gap and why it's such a good hire, or why I would be somebody you could trust and work with. Similarly, when I've hired managers or senior leaders or tech leaders on the team, is for them to kind of really start integrating the team and start showing what differentiates them from what other skill set they bring. And the key to that is like being very open with the team of like, here's the skill sets we have, here are the gaps we have. So when you hire somebody, you have to explain what gap this person is we're gonna aim to fill. And then for that person is to kind of demonstrate that they're actually gonna fill the gap. Not to say that all for hiring decisions have been perfect. We have had our share of misfires as well and have learned from them over time, but try our best to kind of figure out, make sure what gaps we're looking to fill and find the right person to fill those gaps.
Right. Did you, when you went to RX and then in turn to Trualta, did you inherit leaders? Were there already some directors or managers there that you had to inherit?
Yeah.
And then do you find that it's easy to make that transition, or do you prefer as a leader to kind of bring in from a sports analogy, new head coach, you bring in new coordinators and new assistant coaches? Right?
No, I don't believe, I don't believe in that, like bringing my own team, per se. It's like, no, when I joined RX, there was an existing team and we grew some really great leaders from within that team. At Trualta, working on the same, again, I've met with the team and I've been working with them for about 2 months, and it's a sharp set of engineers. Now it's on me, how do I get them the most out of them and give them the guidance to help them grow? So I don't find like there's a reason, like unless there's a team with a very negative energy already. But most teams, like I was lucky at RX, and I'd say I was lucky at Trualta too, is the team is passionate, they're smart, they know what they're doing. Now I have to help harness that and hopefully make it even a more high performing team.
Sure.
And so work with the existing directors. But it's also, to your point, like earlier discussion of like, I got to go build that trust with those directors and make sure that, hey, this is what I'm thinking.
Right.
What do you think? But bring them into the process. So it's not that I can't be sitting in an ivory tower and making those decisions. Like, no, I always believe the people closest to the work know it best.
Yeah.
So how do I bring them part of the process so then I can bring later in my past experiences, things I've learned with what they're doing, and see how to become with the best possible outcome.
Sure.
Have you experienced any sort of clashes yet with maybe members of your team or at RX or whoever it is? Have you dealt with any sort of clashing of cultural, just the way personality conflicts or anything like that?
Yeah, not at Trualta. Nothing big yet, at least I'd say. There's definitely differences between how RX worked and Trualta works, and it's for me to understand. There's a lot of similarities in terms of how people are and how they interact with each other, but then there's cultures are different, and me as a new person coming in, I'm not trying to change the culture per se, but I'm trying to bring my own elements to this culture and see how do I help it grow. But even at RX, we have had a couple of times where somebody did not fit well, and had to
Yeah.
part ways, which is, again, it's a good thing. And another thing that happens in startups is that different people at RX, I saw it more than once, where somebody who was really good for us when we were really, really small, as we grew bigger, they did not fit well because they did not want to change on how they operated. Because as a team grows, you have to do things differently.
Sure.
You got to be willing to change and adapt.
Well, processes change, everything changes. We've
Yeah.
experienced some similar things on our side as well as we've grown. So,
And again, I always go back to, again, if somebody who's not adapting well, as long as a leader, for me, it's to be honest with them and be like, hey, look, these are the gaps. Like, let's figure it out. And if you can't figure them out, well, let's
maybe you're more
very
comfortable
respectful.
somewhere else.
Yeah.
Sure.
Let's go work somewhere else, and that's totally fine.
Sure.
Because it's like not everybody, just like not everybody is to build to work in a startup, not everybody's to go build to work in a larger company either.
Right.
It's just
and it's funny because the whole goal of a startup is to grow into a bigger company. you know,
Right.
So eventually you just sort of grow
Not
out of
everybody
that.
can go along on that journey, I guess.
yeah.
How do you? One question I like asking, especially is sort of that tech leader, CTO, is how do you effectively identify what success is? You've got this team. Sometimes I feel like the team can just have their hands in so many different things. It's kind of hard to get things pushed and done and features delivered. And what would you say some good I guess KPIs, just indicators that your team is performing successfully?
Yeah, it goes in a lot of different ways. I think what I always focus on is the value the team is delivering. So hopefully, if as a company we have company OKRs, we use OKRs, we use them at RX, we're using them at Trualta as well, with its objective and key results. We set them at the company level, we break them down to the team level, and then really focusing on, are we delivering on those key metrics for the company and for our mission, our goal for the year. So that's kind of at the business level, I would say, where you have OKRs that you're using. At a team level, where if I'm just evaluating like the tech team itself, is looking at like how are we, things like improving the platform, like how are we taking the step forward one step at a time, because it's like every platform needs improvements, and if somebody tells you a platform doesn't need improvement, there's something wrong. There's definitely a problem.
Right.
But like as we're improving, what improvements are we making? Like, are we pivoting and improving our development how is the team culture? Are they sharing? Are they learning from each other? If you look at from some key metrics, like if there's a book called Accelerate, which has some really good metrics from like looking at frequency of deployments and kind of your CI/CD metrics. Those kind of tell you how well are we working, what is our pace of work. But that only tells you one side of the story. That just tells you production, that are you producing at a normal cadence. But the real metric is, what is the outcome?
Right.
So if that is output, the number of deployments you've done, that in my head is output. Outcome is like, okay, what business metrics did we change? Did we impact? We had a goal. And again, not every project is going to change a KPI, but like there should be business metrics that we're looking to impact, and how are we impacting those metrics.
And do those change from startup all the way to kind of growing the company, or is it pretty consistent kind of from, building a team all the way through?
No, they change.
Okay.
They definitely change. From like the company OKRs will change every few years. You'll probably kind of set the next big goal for yourself, which again reflects the team. But even at a team level, how we are interacting changes. Like when we had a much bigger team and a lot more hands in the pie, making code changes is like one thing is looking at is how much, like, does it slow down our pace of deployment? Like keeping track of that, code review contributions and things like that. We looked at that a lot, which I think helps kind of make sure that the team culture is staying intact as we're growing.
Right. Now, I was kind of cheating because you and I have talked about this a little bit before, but as I recall, Trualta is based out of Canada. Is that right?
This started in Canada.
Okay.
So
But primarily United States, but the leadership, the company started in.
company started in Canada. We have, I'd say, maybe half of our team is in Canada, half the team is in US based. So we're
But
kind
it's-
of spread all over.
But
Fully
it's a
virtual.
lot of, but where I was going with that is it's a lot of remote, right?
Yeah, fully virtual.
So you kind of went from Cerner, in which everybody was in the really cool new buildings everywhere, scattered throughout Kansas City, to RX Savings was mostly in person up
Mostly
until
Up until
COVID, and then kind of went to hybrid.
Hybrid. Yeah, we were still a lot in person. A lot of us were in person, but yeah.
And now you're going full remote, aren't you?
Yeah. Yep.
That's got to be a challenge too.
Has
You
that
know, to build-
changed your job? I mean, I'd imagine it would have just changed the way you deal with certain.
Yeah, it was an adjustment for me personally because at RX Savings, like we were our office like just 5 minutes from here, and a lot of us used to come in. The leadership came in. Most of my junior leaders lived close by enough that they would come in most of the time, so it was much easier to collaborate because you're in person. So there is something to be said about being in person and collaboration. But being a virtual virtual first team, makes it a little bit. It was a different challenge. One, being on Zoom all day, I had to kind of reset my home office to be more conducive to that. But I think there is some benefits to being fully virtual, where everybody's virtual, so everybody is more expected to be more interactive, right? Like using more written communication, a little bit more asynchronous communication is accepted, but also for me to think about how do I have creative ways to have touch points with everybody. Something I learned from one of my previous managers at Cerner, one of our executives used to do this thing, which I always thought at that time I thought was weird, and then I thought it was, oh, this is pretty cool. Like on Friday afternoons, he would just walk the floor and just randomly stop by you, chat about what's going on your weekend, just building a connection.
Right.
And I always found that I was like, oh, it's a little bit like, is he spying on me? Like, what is he trying to do? And when I was in a position myself, I was like, oh, that's actually pretty cool. Like, just before the end of the week, just connect with people.
Sure.
Have build something, learn something about them, or in a general work environment, the water cooler talk or anything. You're in the break room, you're warming up lunch, and you chat with someone. That's harder to do in a virtual environment.
Yeah,
very.
So you have to be a lot more intentional in creating those scenarios where you are having touch points and having some of that social aspect of it. Something Trualta does, which I thought was amazing, is like every Monday we have an all company meeting for 30 minutes, and it's actually a social meeting. So different teams lead that every Monday, and there's something fun that you do.
And everybody jumps on at one time?
Different, like they'll work
okay.
on breakout groups and
Gotcha.
whatever, like depending on the activity, they'll kind of have the person running has to think through the logistics of how to run it.
Right.
But it's a way to involve the team, kind of bring out some of the personal side.
Mm-hmm.
Outside of like we try to do at Trualta, like how to get the team together twice a year in one location so everybody can meet and get to know each other. But outside of that, like having these like weekly touch points is like I thought it was a great way to just at least have some social aspect of it. Like, hey, we all work together. We talk to each other a lot. So a way to build some of that social connection, personal connection beyond the work connection.
Yeah. I always find it interesting that we've had other guests on and we've talked about this topic because it seems like everybody's, very few are full in office anymore. Everybody's either hybrid or remote. Do you have a camera policy? I hadn't run into this up until recently, and then one of our guests was talking about he's a big proponent of cameras on.
Yeah.
Right. Everybody needs to have their camera on.
We don't have a hard camera policy. We didn't even have that at RX, but as leaders, we would always leave our cameras on.
Mm-hmm.
And I think where I firmly believe it, if I want others to do it, I got to do it myself.
Correct.
So regardless of what I was at, I would always have my camera on, and then naturally people would leave camera on. At RX, we were pretty good about leaving our cameras on, especially if we had a hybrid team, which is a little bit challenging because the person remote would always get left out. So for us, it was very intentional of cameras on, investing in some good camera technology in our conference room, so the person remote is not feeling left out of the room, and bringing that. Encouraging that cameras should be turned on and left on,
sure,
and just to kind of see people and encourage that behavior. And Trualta too, I don't see most people like almost always leave their camera on. So just you get used to it.
Yeah.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I know. Oh, go ahead.
We've gone kind of through that as, camera calls, a lot of video calls with customers and so forth. And we had to kind of go through that policy with the leads of, cameras on, but also professional backgrounds.
Right.
Yeah, sometimes they don't
go crazy. Don't do it from your bedroom. With
I think
the dirty
we had
clothes in the
one
background.
guy who had a basement that was full of junk, but just no. That's
Yeah.
We
No,
gotta
definitely.
spruce that up a bit.
you gotta watch where you're sitting, and that's where like some of all the new video conferencing ones have blur background and stuff, so you can get creative in hiding some of that or virtual backgrounds.
Right.
But and then again, that's like more. I would just want to look at you and be able to look at your eyes. Have that direct connection is important.
I think it is because I hadn't thought of it that much, and then this person was going, hey, it's just you can read facial expressions. You get a lot more out of
It's true.
looking at someone while you're talking to them versus
body language
just,
is something you lose when you go remote. So having that,
definitely.
I equate to I've done conference talks, I do them pretty regularly, and one thing I always say is like I feed off the energy in the room. If I'm speaking and I can like I'm usually scanning the room, and that's where I find it very hard to do virtual talks because it's like I can't see people's eyes or how much they're going along with me on this ride. And I've done in conference talks where when I'm on a given topic on a specific part of my presentation and I see people really leaning in, is that I might go longer on that topic and shorten something else, or shorten a topic where I see like people are like starting to like check out.
Right.
But that's the energy you get from looking at people's faces and how excited they are. So it makes it a lot more fun.
Definitely.
No,
Thank you.
I appreciate
Thank you
that.
for having me.
Yeah,
It was
absolutely, man.
really great talking to both of you.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I thought that's a lot of information yourself.